Welcome to AP Economics presented by Cobranomics, your all-American American history teacher, gold standard of economics, and sensei of supply side, Professor G here. And today we are doing Unit 2, Lesson number 4, what happens to shifts in supply and demand when they shift. So we're taking a look at autonomous changes regardless of price to supply and demand. Today we're going to take a look at how to solve those problems. Now they don't appear in the free response section, but you will have maybe one or two of them in the multiple choice section. And there should be no reason to get these wrong as long as you follow the rules of how to solve them and to graph them out. So, steps. Number 1. First, ask yourself, first remember, one scenario in the question is one supply or demand. It is one perspective. So one scenario, one perspective. Ask yourself, based on this scenario, whose ability and willingness is immediately affected? One scenario, only one supply or demand, the consumer's or the producer's ability or willingness will be affected. The consumer's ability and willingness to buy, or the supplier's ability and willingness to produce. Where is this change taking place? From the consumer in the product market, or somewhere in the factor market affecting that product going to the market? So 1, ask yourself, who is it being affected, and how is their ability and willingness being affected? Is it being positively or negatively affected? Then, when in doubt, graph it out. Make sure, remember that left is decrease, right is increase. So if it's a positive effect, the graph will shift to the right. If it is a negative effect, the graph will shift to the left. So let's take a look at an example we used for law of demand when we said that all of a sudden studies for pizza show that it will improve your SAT score. And we said, well, at $2.50 a slice, all of a sudden people are more willing and able to buy pizza. So we're talking about the consumers. Let's follow our flow chart. We are talking about the consumer's ability and willingness, which is law of demand. And how is that law of demand being affected? In a positive way. So, it is demand in this scenario. And very importantly, we have lots of arrows. When you graph it out, always show the arrows. Arrows tell the reader, the person who is grading your exam, that this is a change that is occurring. You will lose points on the AP test if you do not use your arrows. So, it is an increase in demand. Demand is shifting to the right. Everybody play along at home. And it goes from D, which is our original curve, to D1, meaning that demand has now increased. This used to be the demand, and now the demand has now increased. So, let's take a look at now what happens. People are more willing and more able to want this product and therefore to pay for this product. And because people are more willing and able to want and pay for this product, the price of the product, P to P1, we see there's a new, X marks the spot, a new equilibrium. People are willing to pay more because they want it, and because people are willing to pay more, now from the supplier's perspective, price is profit. So, if people are willing to pay more, producers are willing to produce more. And that's why we have in the market, we will also see an increase in quantity. So taking a look at the entire market of pizza, if studies show that pizza increases your SAT score, the result will be more pizza in the market at a higher price. And if we also notice here that while demand is shifting, because people are willing to pay that higher price, we see that increase in quantity supplied. So it's that shift of demand and that movement along the line, movement along the curve on the supply curve. You don't have to actually draw over this on the AP test. I'm just doing it to illustrate that because the price increases, there is an increase in quantity supplied, and that takes our market to P1 and Q1. Let's re-rack our graph and do one more example. Example number 2 that we used for pizza. Let's say there is an increase in the minimum wage. Again, not coming down politically on either side of it, just the political and economic and graphical reality of the situation. Remember, in Cobranomics, no feelings, just reality. So, what would happen if there's an increase in minimum wage? Now this is tricky because on one hand you might think, oh, that is consumers earning more money. But it's also, and more immediately, when you see wage, that is the supply market, right? That's immediately, wage is immediately the factor market. So it's a tricky question, it will appear, but when you see wage, it is the factor market because that's businesses paying the wages to households. So it's another reason we're doing this question. Be careful because you really have to think what is the most immediate one, and it is the factor market. That's where the wage is taking place. So it is going to be the producers are going to be affected. Well, how are the producers going to be affected? Well, their input costs are increasing. And if their input costs are increasing, it is now more difficult for them to break even, and therefore more difficult in their ability and willingness to produce. This is going to lead to a decrease in supply, or a shift to the left. And again, be careful for supply because remember, decrease is a leftward shift. Don't shift supply to the right thinking that it looks like it's going down. A shift to the right would be an increase. So if supply is decreasing due to the higher input costs, and it is now harder for businesses to break even, we would have a shift to the left. So we take our arrow, let's draw a nice little arrow right there, do a green line. We have S1. This indicates that the arrow shows there is a new reality for supply. That's producers are now producing at S1 and not S. S is on your graph, but it's no longer there. As we go, here is our new E. E1, X marks the spot. This is where this is showing equilibrium, where the economy is now. So businesses it is now harder for businesses to make a profit, and they're going to produce less at a higher price, which is exactly what we see. Now businesses have to cut back their production. They go from Q to Q1 because of the higher wages. It costs them more to produce the same things, and the businesses also have to now make more with less, so they have to raise their prices. So the new market for pizza would be less quantity at a higher price. And we also see what we saw before with there's a shift of one curve and there's a movement along the other curve. Because the price is now increased, it's going to affect consumers with a decrease in quantity demanded, or a movement along the leftward movement along the demand curve. Take these questions slowly. Always take the extra 10 seconds. Right now, it's hard to graph it out. This is your first rodeo doing it, but take the 10 seconds to graph it out, and you will always get the answer correct. Just check what the multiple choice questions, which one of those questions match your graph. Don't go through each A, B, C, D, E, which one looks right. Choose which one of those choices matches your graph, what you drew. Now we're going to escalate the difficulty of this. What happens if there are two scenarios? They're never going to give you three scenarios, but they might give you two different scenarios. So let's re-rack and take a look. For our example, which is two scenarios, escalating our difficulty, sometimes you will receive a question that has like a little mini paragraph about these two scenarios, and it will be clear there are two scenarios. So for our example, we're going to take a look at the AAHA, also known as the American Affordable Health Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Not coming down politically on one side or the other of it, we're just going to take a look at its two core concepts. The first one being the mandate and voucher system increase the availability of access to health care, and two, there is a general increased cost and regulations to healthcare providers. But first, just a little quick thing about healthcare and insurance. And what people do is people put money into the pot called a premium. This is for any kind of insurance. It could be for health insurance, it could be for car insurance, it could be for life insurance, for home insurance, for renter's insurance. And insurance is generally the best money you want to waste, because that means you never need to withdraw from the pot. You don't need to go to the doctor, something did not happen to your home, and in life insurance that means you're dead. So you never want to, you want this to be the best money you waste, but you have to have it, God forbid something does happen. Because the copay, if something does happen, you get to withdraw from the pot, and you're personally responsible for the copay, to the health care, right? So you pay a small portion of the actual bill. The health care, you withdraw from the pot, and that means that the insurance company pays the larger percentage, the rest of the copay. So the copay is broken into two copayments, a smaller one by you and a much larger one by the insurance corporation. And they pay that to the healthcare provider. And it works the same for all types of insurance. You have to have it, you hope you never use it. But sometimes it's for good things, like for births and stuff like that. Those are thousands and thousands of dollars. You only pay a fraction of that, but it does cost a lot of money. If you think about everything that is involved in the birth of a child, it costs thousands of dollars. And we only have to pay a fraction of that because of our healthcare industry and insurance industry. So let's take a look. So do remember that for later on in life. And in terms of life insurance, it's something you don't need to get that until you're married and planning a family. There's certain insurances you need to get along the road of life, and you don't need to add them all at once once you start your first time job. Just a little side personal finance note. So let's go back to this. So what is going to happen to the healthcare industry based on these two scenarios? And most importantly, for the AP test, how do we solve this problem? Two scenarios. What we do not do is draw both things on the same graph. Then you have lines and arrows going everywhere, and you're just increasing the percentage chance of you getting the question wrong. So what you have to do is really follow the same steps for each scenario on each graph, and then compare what happens to price and what happens to quantity. So let's take a look at the first one. Mandated voucher system, increase the availability of healthcare to people. That would be the ability and willingness of the consumer to buy healthcare. So this is talking about demand. Demand for healthcare has increased. So let's graph it out. People are now more willing and definitely more able to buy healthcare. So demand will shift to the right. We see our new, X marks the spot, our new equilibrium, where the new demand curve is on the supply curve. And as we said before, people have now more access to it and are more able and more willing to pay. So price will increase as we're more willing and more able to pay for something. And as price increases, this is also going to increase the quantity supplied by the healthcare industry. So the healthcare industry is, or the healthcare insurance industry is now providing more healthcare to people, as we are now more willing and able to get healthcare insurance. So for our P and Q, we see that P increases and Q also increases. Nice simple arrows. Again, because on the AP test, just graph it like 10, 20 seconds, graph with good detail, but it's just scrap work. Now let's take a look at number 2. An increased cost and regulations to healthcare providers. Keyword here, providers, firms, businesses. The increased cost and regulations to the providers of healthcare are now going to decrease the amount of actual healthcare available. So interestingly, people will now have more access to health insurance. However, the actual healthcare providers, it is now more difficult in their ability and willingness to provide healthcare into the market. So let's see what happens. This is going to decrease the ability and willingness to supply healthcare. Again, not politically coming down on either side of it, just looking at the economic and graphic reality of these two core concepts to it. So we see supply decreases. Remember, supply decreases, it's shift to the left because we're focused on the idea of quantity, that quantity is decreasing. And so quantity is decreasing, and since they are providing less, they also have to charge more because price is profit to make more with less. So we see here that price in scenario number 2, price increases, however, quantity decreases. So on a multiple choice test, you could say that price definitely will increase. We could predict that price will increase. However, quantity is increasing and decreasing. On the AP test, this has a couple of different words to it. So quantity is either ambiguous or indeterminate. We know it's changing, but the market forces are pulling it in two different directions. And because it's just theory, we don't know the extent each direction is being pushed. So we would say that price definitively increases, but the change to quantity will be ambiguous or indeterminate. Remember, when solving these questions, make sure to graph each one out separately. And remember, one scenario is one shift, either supply or demand. 2 scenarios is 2 shifts. One will be supply and one will be demand. Go slow. When in doubt, graph it out. Thank you for watching. And remember, whether it is your mind, your money, or your body, invest hard, invest often, and no feelings. Money never sleeps. We'll see you next time.